Thank you very much. Welcome, folks, to the final session of today's program. And the topic we have for discussion with this rather distinguished panel is opportunities for innovation, discovering emerging areas, and professionalism. So I think we all understand that innovation is going to be the key factor for growth of economy, of a company, of even people. So I think we are going to have some very interesting conversations around innovation, and we will try to talk to you about identifying some potential areas in Sri Lanka where folks like you who are abroad might want to consider looking at in terms of your return. And last but not least, all this will be nothing if we don't have a very high sense of professionalism. So I think the topic is very interesting, very timely, and I don't want to take up much more of your time. And I will first invite the panelists to take about 3 to 5 minutes and tell us their thoughts, their initial thoughts on the topic, and then I will engage with them in a Q&A for a few minutes, and then we'll have the majority of the time for you to interact with the panel. So without any further ado, let's kick things off. Sarinder, would you like to go first, please, and tell us a little about what your thoughts are on the topic?
Peter, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Pleasure to be here. I'm going to draw on a personal story in terms of the industry that I work in. I work in apparel, and we'd like to think that we are the largest apparel manufacturer in Sri Lanka. We have about a $1.6 billion turnover right now. When I left my previous job to join apparel about 14 years ago, my father, when he heard about it, just went really quiet for a little while, and he said, "So you're leaving a perfectly good job to go and become a glorified tailor." And that was the impression that people had of the whole apparel industry at that time. But I think over the last 15 years, we've come a huge way. And if you look at apparel right now in Sri Lanka, it's become a nerve center for innovation, for creation of new products, new services. And it really has got some excellent partnerships in the world of apparel and fashion, where we can truly call ourselves a leading player in that space. So while there are many experts from other areas also, I'd like to just concentrate on the area that I should know a little bit about. I hope I do. And say that we really have come to a place right now where lots of people can aspire to develop their careers and develop their lives based in Sri Lanka, because in the past it was seen purely as a cut and sew operation. But right now all the expansion in the cut and sew space is taking place in other countries like Bangladesh, Indonesia, Vietnam. Those are the places where we are going and setting up our cut and sew plants. The nerves, the real true value addition is taking place here. So I think there's great potential for anybody who's looking for career development in Sri Lanka.
Thank you. Thank you. That was very brief. You didn't take up all of your time.
I can rattle on for another half an hour.
Excellent, excellent. We will when we get going. Shiromal, would you like to tell us a little bit about what you think of the topic?
Yeah. Again, I go on to everybody. As Sarinder said, let me also talk about something that I'm a little familiar with, which is the hospitality industry. I work in a company which has hotels and travel, both inbound and outbound. So if you talk about innovation and professionalism, I think all of you know the whole industry is changing, not just in Sri Lanka, all over the world. Gone are the days when somebody went into a travel agency and bought a packaged holiday. It's all changing. The booking engines, I don't have to tell you. You all are young enough to know all the things. So a lot of innovation happening, and even in Sri Lanka, the product is changing. So many younger people are coming up with lots of exciting adventure, a lot of new products. The industry is also going through a maturing phase where people are not afraid to invest in the industry. So a lot of opportunities, as I said, for guides. It's just not necessarily you have to be a doctor or an engineer. You don't have to have that high educational qualifications. All you need are the soft skills. You can be if you are somebody who enjoys languages, you can be a very good quality guide, because Peter spoke of professionalism. That is one area where I think we lack in our hospitality industry. Most of us we are very hospitable people. Sri Lankans are known to be hospitable, and we try to smile and get away from most of our faults. I think we should get out of that because we are asking the customer to pay very high prices now. because costs are gone up. So we are demanding a higher price. At the same time, the client is demanding also. So therefore, one needs to be really professional. Just having that smile and getting by is not enough. So we need chefs, we need lots of soft-skilled people, you know, who can really revolutionize this industry. You know, the apparel obviously had a 20, 30-year good run, and I think this is the time for tourism to really develop and get into one of the major industries in the country. If I can just touch a little bit about females, because there are a fair amount of females I have seen in the audience. As a woman, I can tell you this is a place where you can safely work without any issue. I mean, there are issues. I think being a woman, there are various issues that happen in companies. Say you go to a bank, you go to Mrs. Jayamha is obviously she has come up to the top in a bank. But having said all of that, if you want to make a career, Sri Lanka is one of the best places for a woman to make a career because we have all the help. We have our extended families. We are fortunate still to have some domestic help, which is affordable. So one can easily balance the work-life balance and have a family. I mean, we can try and have it all in a sense in Sri Lanka. So thank you.
Thank you, Shiromal. Rani, would you like to please share your thoughts?
Okay. Thank you, Peter, and good evening to all of you. I also share the views expressed by Shiromal and the former speaker as well. Let me just assure you that it is really the opportune time to look for working in Sri Lanka. That's because everybody is looking for growth prospects. We have it in Sri Lanka. People are looking for protection and security. We have it in Sri Lanka. Asia is growing. Asia has been the growth center now, and it is going to be so in the next 5 to 10 years. At the same time, Sri Lanka also has been having a continuous growth. If you look at all the sectors that are going to add value to this growth, I mean, practically every sector is growing. I mean, there are so many industrial sectors that are represented here at the panel as well as in the audience, and you will see that all the growth sectors are getting ready to add value. I can speak for the banking and the financial services sector, which I have been working for many, many years. And the sector is effectively looking for people to come and work for Sri Lanka and to get their knowledge, because innovative knowledge, innovation, expertise knowledge, and specialists in particular areas are needed now. Because the banking sector is supposed to be one of the pioneer sectors contributing to the value addition and the growth in the next couple of years. And we have to pull the economy, so therefore there is a great demand for banking and financial services in the country. When I say the banking and financial services, I just don't mean the kind of old-fashioned bank branch-based kind of assistance that's to be given. We need innovative products, we need innovative communication systems, we have to improve the inclusion and enhancement of financial knowledge in the industry. We need people for that. We need innovative thinking for that. There are great opportunities right now, and it is going to be more also in the next couple of years. I can assure that there is a lot of opportunities that are coming up, not only in the financial services sector, but also the other ancillary sectors as well. For example, we can't go on becoming an emerging high-income country in Asia without having innovative products, new professionalism. So therefore, we have talents here in Sri Lanka. While we are developing it, we really are looking forward for new talents that are going to come to Sri Lanka to work for maybe for short-term periods or even for longer time or for good, because there are so many talented people who have left the country, and also the foreign community who are looking to take places in Sri Lankan context. Thank you.
Thank you for that rather optimistic and very bright picture you have painted, Rani, and we'll come back to some of those things you spoke about. Thilan, are you ready to go next, or you want to have Harsha go first and then
That's fine.
you're fine? Okay.
Good evening, everyone. As someone who took a risk and left a relatively comfortable job at Sampath Bank to start a business in the early 90s, during the war years, I can tell you the opportunity for entrepreneurship today is far greater than what it was in the early 1990s when a bunch of us started a company called Asia Capital. I can still recall that 6 weeks after we lost a president in the form of Mr. Premadasa and a minister Lalitatulat Mudali. We were knocking on doors in London and the major financial centers and raised Sri Lanka's first ever country fund called the Region Sri Lanka Fund, 25 million US to invest in various companies in Sri Lanka. So that was what was possible during a very dark period of this country. And the opportunities now, in the context of the war having ended, is immense. And that's when, again, I took a calculated risk and decided to get back into entrepreneurship. Of course, I sold out of Asia Capital because at that time, I felt that under the conditions that prevailed in the country, there were great opportunities outside investment banking. I did run the Board of Investment for a short period where I brought in a team of investment bankers. And that again, Rani, you'll appreciate that the very fact that some of us were headhunted to do landmark transactions like privatization of telecom. Today you can get a telephone in 2 hours because of the work some of us did many years ago. And then privatizing part of the port, bringing in private power generation, building about 5-6 hospitals. So all that happened because a group of professionals got involved in public service. Shiromal spoke about leisure. Plenty of opportunities. I do have my share of experience in the leisure industry together with Dilmati, having started a couple of unique luxury resorts. In addition, opportunities in this country are abound. Particularly, let me highlight an inspiration I got from being nurtured by Mr. Merrill Fernando, who has taken our tea industry to another level. Again, a bunch of us got together. I found the right person to head up this company. We started a company called Sapphirus, whose vision is to take the Ceylon Sapphire to become as well known as Ceylon tea. And today, 4 years later, we have 135 cutters in Ratnapura, and our buyers are Cartier, Chanel, Tiffany, Van Cleef, Patek Philippe, etc. Again, my regret is that we are the only company and the largest lapidary in Ratnapura. There should be hundreds of companies that are adding value to Sapphire. My final sort of entrepreneurial experience I want to touch on again, it's this nervous energy that I have when I see something. I usually back the management team or take an idea from one of my board members is when we started digital commerce, which was originally anything.lk. Today, with the part acquisition of the company by Dialog, we are wow.lk. And again, a very simple proposition. We introduced the deal space, the Groupon equivalent to Sri Lanka, and then we migrated now to the Amazon space, which is online retail. And we are trying to solve a very simple proposition here. We are not necessarily an e-commerce company or a mobile commerce company, but we are a company that's trying to exploit the distribution inefficiencies in this country to get a product from here to, say, even Vaunia, cheaper than that consumer can go to a shop there and purchase it. So it's a journey. I mean, it's going to be tough. It has been tough, but I'm quite confident that we'll become a multi-billion rupee company over the next few years. So Sri Lanka is a country which, if I'm addressing those who are thinking of coming back or have ideas of coming back, certainly it's a country that gives you opportunity to reinvent yourself. There's less competition for you to shine because you don't have hundreds of thousands of people with international experience coming here because frankly our population levels are lower than, say, India. So you have an opportunity to shine. I mean, that's if I were to say something at a personal level, I think, to me it was a privilege to be able to become chairman of the Board of Investment at 34, 35 years of age. And that's because we proved ourselves when we started Asia Capital. The final comment I'd like to make is that look at Sri Lanka not necessarily for its politics, but make a realistic assessment what the opportunity is and be pragmatic in making your decisions. Don't take a step back saying we don't like the politics or we don't like the people who are ministers, you are ministers there, and the way this country is being governed. I mean, the country is being governed well. However, it can be always governed better, but don't let that be what holds you back. If we, as young 20-something entrepreneurs, held back because the country was at war when we started Asia Capital, we would have never become successful entrepreneurs. My final comment is we are a country that is short of innovation, short of entrepreneurial skills, needing managerial talent. We have great managers who are in the country, but we need more. And I think it's through entrepreneurship and through enterprising people who come here, prepare a business plan like how I did and went to Mr. Merrill Fernando and say, can you support this venture? I'm sure you can find partners who have money who will back your venture.
Something.
Thank you, Thilan.
I think it was
Harsha, please.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Hi. When I was doing my PhD in UK, I was living in UK more than I lived in Sri Lanka. So when I was living in UK, during my PhD, I actually started writing the first booking engine. So I'm trying to sell a booking engine to you. So first booking engine to the world. So I actually wrote that particular booking engine to WorldSpan. And that is where you go to Expedia last minute, so you can actually book your flights and hotels and stuff like that. So those are the type of booking engine I wrote that particular time. So that was the innovation that time. So anybody thought that, wow, this is really cool. So you can actually book a flight on the internet rather than just going and calling a travel agency or et cetera, et cetera. By doing that, what happened is like most of the people who said that this is the guy I can trust on to develop a mega system. And then they actually called me, so many different guys called me, asked me to build a bigger, massive system for the travel industry. So by doing that, I studied the travel industry, but I never knew about travel anywhere. So what I did was when I looked at the travel industry, I saw a mess. I thought it's the most messiest industry I can ever be in is actually the travel industry. I mean, they take the smallest thing and they make it multiply as much as possible. So you make an ant, they can make an elephant out of it, right? So they actually, when you try to sell these hotels, you have no idea what they do. If you the sea view side, if you on this one, you need to apply 18%, give the what do you call for this tour operator another 5%, give this one 2%. If you ask them what is the total income and outcome, there's not much difference. So anyway, it's a very complex industry to go into. So we started developing softwares for that particular industry, a fully blown ERP solution for the travel industry. So during that particular time, I came to Sri Lanka, and I was actually having 2 foot, 1 foot in working in the PhD side of it, and the other foot is also working part-time for another company, and also developing this travel software as well. So one of my friends gave me a good advice. He said, leave whatever the job you are doing, and just concentrate on this particular business. So that's the best advice I ever heard. So I said, okay. And he said to me, if you leave whatever the job you are going to do and jump into this side, then only thing you have is like you had to survive with that particular business. Because you had to survive with that particular business, you are going to do good. Otherwise, you'll never ever make a business out. So then I came to Sri Lanka. They tried to find people in Sri Lanka. It's very difficult early 2000 to find right people. And in the middle of the war, and so many people left this country. So finally, I found 2 people. One is a graphic designer, and the other one is actually claimed to be a software engineer. Apparently, he was not a software engineer. So and in the end, the graphic designer also the same. He was working for a printing press, but he never worked on graphic at all. So then, at the end of the day, I started teaching them graphics and also teaching them how to write Java programs, C programs, C++, Linux. When I came and told them about Linux, he said this guy must be completely out of his mind to use something called Linux. He's a crazy guy come to Sri Lanka talking about Linux, right? So anyway, so that's a company I started, and then when you're growing up, to get a really good guy out from the university was difficult because I had a very small space, less than this particular half of this stage. And to get somebody to convince and coming and working for us is extremely difficult. But because of the technology I knew, most of the guys started, okay, there is a crazy guy who comes to Sri Lanka, he wants to hire some other people, so we can actually learn something crazy. So some crazy guys actually joined. So, so some of the crazy guys, I can see them as well.
Can you actually identify them?
So I said, there's a guy, I can remember, Damita, Damita is there. So anyway, he was one of the crazy guys to join. He said, okay, I'm going to join this crazy man and to do crazy things. So likewise, there's another guy I had to admire. He actually joined the company. I was paying 22,000 rupees for him, right? And one day, he came to me, he said, Harsha, I had to tell you something. I said, what? I've been offered a job for 150,000 rupees, nearly 200,000 rupees, $1,500. And I make my decision. I said, what did you make your decision on? And he said, I decided to stay with you. That particular time, I realized there are some extremely crazy Sri Lankans. So then next day onwards, what I wanted to do is to go behind these extremely crazy Sri Lankans, because if I find 10 people or 100 people, I can get 10 extremely crazy Sri Lankans. So I actually start collecting these gems and minerals, mainly they are the diamonds of Sri Lanka. So those diamonds over time grew and grew and grew and grew. Today, I have a company about nearly 250 to 300 people. And then today we run one of the largest brands in the world, like Emirates, Virgin, Transat, Royal Caribbean, one of the largest brands in the world. Their entire solution is running on our solution. So we develop, maintain, manufacture, and do every single thing in Sri Lanka right in Colombo. So one of the things I always want to tell you is like, but 2 years ago, I was living in UK because UK is the best way to go into the different markets. Because if I go straight from Sri Lanka to the rest of the market, a little bit different on the legal side of it. But if I go into UK and have the UK sales and marketing and all the development happen in Sri Lanka, there's two different things. So they will think this is a British company and then British law is better, so that we are going to rely on that. Because these contracts are very large contracts. They are not $100,000, $200,000 contracts. They are $1 million contracts. So those contracts, they have to be very careful about the legal side of it. So that particular legal side of it is not being established in Sri Lanka as yet. But they trust the UK law. So that's the reason we do all the sales and marketing in UK side, not in Sri Lankan side. And then we are in all over the world. So that is something that, and then majority of the people, because of that reason, I lived in UK. But 3 years ago, I decided I want to come back to Sri Lanka for so many other reasons. I don't have time to do that.
No, you have time. You're fine.
No. One of the other reasons. When I was living in Sri Lanka, I thought, okay, rather than spending, I was living half in UK and half in Sri Lanka. So one day I decided I want to go there and spend most of my time in Sri Lanka rather than living in UK. So when I come to Sri Lanka, there are so many pros that I can have because I already established the company, and then I have a huge, massive difference living in Sri Lanka and living in UK. Living in UK is like I was living in London all this time, so you have every single thing you probably people needed. You have the theater, you need restaurants, you need bars, you need the ancient culture, city, everything. But you don't have exactly the same thing in Sri Lanka. But Sri Lanka has something that nobody else has. One of the most important reason that I changed my life about 8 years ago. Changed to become a vegetarian and non-drinker, non-smoker, and then I actually started to go behind Buddhism and start meditating and continuous of the meditation. And to do good karma, the best place is Sri Lanka. So I realized, hold on a minute, now I had done the crazy things, now I had to come there and try to collect some more karma so that I can do crazy things next life. So before ending that life, I decided to, one day I said, while you're here, you need to drive a supercar as well. So I went and had a look at the price of a Lamborghini, and it comes to about $1.1 million or something like that. I thought that is really absurd to go there and spend $1.1 million. So because of that reason, I'm going to build a car rather than buying a car. So that's the car idea came around. So I was sitting in the office, and again I thought, let's build a car. So I thought to myself, I'm going to build a car. Then, funny enough, in Kochen, there were so many crazy guys. They said, okay, let's build a car. So the second crazy thing is happening is to build the craziest supercar in Sri Lanka. So I told somebody, and they asked me one day, they asked me, what is your next venture? I said, there's a book called Monku Sold His Ferrari. Right? So my thing is going to be Monku Sold His Vega. Vega is a car. Thank you.
Thank you. So we'll talk a little more about that. Commenting on the crazy Sri Lankans, I remember Lenin said, give me 100 professional revolutionaries and I will overturn Russia. But looks like you're saying, give me 10 crazy Sri Lankans.
Yeah.
And we can make a change for innovation. I like to set this whole conversation for the benefit of those who are considering seriously about coming to Sri Lanka in a very specific context. That is, I believe that all businesses exist to create value, to create, deliver, and to capture value. And you're trying to do this in an extremely dynamic marketplace. Today, the marketplace is very dynamic. The customers are well informed. So in that context, I believe to maintain a sustainable competitive advantage, the key thing that all of us in the panel here and businesses and any organization will look is essentially for people who can come and innovate. Because this incremental stuff, the people in Sri Lanka who are already here can do, and some crazy people can do this. So I'll go to you first, Sarinder, tell us specifically in the garment industry, because you see I do realize that you are in an industry that's largely described as a manufacturing base. And from what I recently looked at, the manufacturing industry is contributing only about 7% to global value add. So clearly that is not a very sustainable model. And it's very interesting that Mahesh, in a recent conversation we had with him at Hema's, he spoke about a new approach for MAS, which is today you are a $1.6 billion company. His goal for the next, I believe next 6 years, I don't know exactly how many years, I missed that, is to grow your business 2x. And interestingly, 50% of the business should come from innovation, which means you are not going to focus on manufacturing, but rather on products maybe. In that context, could you share with the audience and the people here, what are the areas of innovation that you may be looking at in terms of the apparel industry and this transformation that you are looking at MAS?
So in terms of the whole innovation side, most of us when we think of innovation, we think of a product. We think of something new that's going to come out. But if you look at innovation, how we look at it at MAS, there are about 4 or 5 pillars that we've broken it into. Cost innovation, manufacturing innovation, process innovation, machinery innovation, and product innovation. So if you look at those different areas, each area requires a different skill set in terms of what you have to bring to the table when you're entering that area. So over the years, when we started manufacturing garments here, and I won't go into the 25-year history, Thilan, you probably know more about that than I do, but since I joined, we were pretty much a cut and sew operator, as I said earlier, and then gradually we started adding little by little, a little bit of value to the product. So the first thing that came in was product development, which meant that we were taking other people's designs, making technical designs out of them, and then cutting and sewing and manufacturing. Then we started adding the whole dimension of design into it. So say for example, the company that we run, that I run, Linea Aqua, we work directly with the designers of Victoria's Secrets. Unfortunately, I don't get to work directly with the models, but I'm working on it. I'm trying. No success so far. H&M, Triumph, Lands' End, Speedo, Calvin Klein. So we work with a lot of these guys.
So
and
are you saying, Sarinder, that you actually are designing for them?
Yeah, we do. Yeah.
Are you? Okay.
Yeah. A lot of the designs that we do right now are either taken partially or in its entirety and used on the Victoria's Secret lines. So if you look at even lingerie, for example, a lot of what you see on the catwalks and you see on the show are actually made in Sri Lanka, and those are our designs. So done by Sri Lanka.
What about material design? For example, now Mahesh was talking about how he went to France for an exhibition and came across by chance this guy who was using silicone as a base, and no elastic, no stitches, panties, and people missed that whole opportunity, but Mahesh caught it and then pursued it. And a very interesting story, we'll talk about it some other time. He actually put the panties in his pocket and took it out at a dinner with Victoria's Secret, and that's a nice story. But that led to a...
That could get you into trouble walking off with somebody's panties.
$80 million business. But are you doing fundamental research in areas like material?
Absolutely. So a lot of it is done either with by ourselves in certain areas, or in most cases what we do is we go to the universities. And Nathan, who was here in the previous panel, was probably the best person to talk about this because he's the head of innovations at MAS. But what we do is we've tied up with people like Stanford University, we tied up with Loughborough, we tied up with various universities around the world, and some of the best brains are coming from even Moratuwa and the Sri Lankan universities, because we have some extremely smart people in Sri Lanka right now. So while early on, we were saying that some of the competition is not as great, in sheer numbers, as Thilan said, the numbers don't match up. So the numbers that we require for the jobs, as if you match that with the numbers of qualified people available, there is still a huge gap in terms of what we need. So what started happening was we were hiring a lot of overseas people. For example, in our company, we had Filipinos, we had South Africans, we had Australians, English, Brits, Americans. So all these people, we were bringing in the expertise that we couldn't find on the island into Sri Lanka to do the technical jobs and to do the innovative jobs. But what's happened is with this happening in the industry over the last 5 or 6 years, even the campuses are now producing people who are capable of meeting that need. So we are getting some really smart kids coming in who are experts in biomechanical engineering, physics, chemistry, all this stuff. So they can start really adding value to the product quality that you're seeing. So this whole process that we are talking about, it's fairly secretive in terms of what it actually entails, but it is a fairly innovative product that could disrupt the entire market.
Right. Shiromal, your business, leisure, which is I believe now is about what, $1.2 billion? Is that the market size, Rani? Is that correct? Something like that, yeah. So 1.6 billion there, 1.2 billion. So we're really adding up the numbers here on the panel. Where are you seeing the challenges that you face in the leisure sector that is making it difficult for you to, keep a sustained competitive advantage? Where are the specific areas you're looking for to create this competitive advantage in the leisure sector?
Yeah, okay. I suppose, see, it's a service industry, so one needs people, as I said before, who are professional, who can deliver something, the product, the service should be at a really professional level. Again, as I said before, we have got by in the last 30 odd years because we had to sell on price. People were not really wanting to visit Sri Lanka, the problems we had. So everybody got used to reducing prices and selling on price. And as a result, I don't think much effort was or attention was paid on training staff and making them, really professional. So as a result, unfortunately, getting good staff to deliver the product at a professional level is something we lack. I don't know whether it's a Sri Lankan trait or it's something that we tend to not deliver on our promises. We tend not to be punctual. So those little things, or we tend not to respect other people's wishes. We tend not to listen to other people. All these little things has a huge impact on our industry. For example, if a driver who earns perhaps 25,000, 30,000 rupees, he sets the alarm to pick somebody up at the airport or to pick somebody for a departure, and he just falls asleep again. He just wants to sleep for 2 minutes and then he falls asleep, and then he may miss the transfer. And the particular person whom he's going to transfer could be a CEO for some company who's going to have a multi-million-dollar deal to sign as he gets back. So it has lots of issues that people don't realize that we have to deal with in travel and tourism.
So you're talking largely about the service.
Yeah, it's a service, the
Just to
professionalism.
kind of make it, there could be people here who might be, what about the whole cuisine side? Because we are seeing massive innovation in that area. But I'm sorry to say some of the hotels still serve the old salad leaf and, throw a little bit of, carrots and stuff like that. Whereas in MasterChef and all that, we see a huge development in cuisine, which is technology and also creativity.
Correct.
So we don't see a lot of that, Shiromal, in Sri Lanka. But there may be some budding chefs here.
Definitely.
Would you hire them? Are you looking for people who can make a change?
Definitely, we are looking for just not international, say Chinese, Indian. These are all areas where somebody can really develop themselves and as you say, add to the industry. Lots of areas. Cuisine is one, as Peter said. Then I was talking about guiding, experiences, but lots of things that people are now looking for. Even the food, it need not be in a hotel. There are so many other ways in which we can serve food for people. We can make it innovation is essential for us. If not, we are going to, as you said, if we keep serving the same old, I think we are going to be really left behind.
Thank
because
you.
now, it's very important.
Rani, about banking, I'm sorry, I'm a big I have a lot of problems with banking, really. I was a banker myself at State Bank, so we had the old Dickensian books, ledgers and all that I've written on. But I don't think banks have changed a lot since then, to be perfectly honest. Maybe because you enjoy a very big spread in Sri Lanka, unlike some of the other countries in the region. So I find that banks are not really looking to innovate. Whereas, for example, ING Savings with Arcadia Kuhlman, he has completely revolutionized the savings banking in the US. Where are you looking at? For example, if people want to come and join a bank in Sri Lanka, honestly, can they really come and put some of their innovation to practice? Some banks don't even allow their employees to use the internet. They block internet in this day and age. So what is the scope for innovation in banking in Sri Lanka?
A lot, I would say.
Good.
My bank, of course, is a much innovative bank compared to many others. But that being the case, I would advocate all banks to take the lead in bringing in innovation and professionalism into the financial services industry. Why I say this is still the banks in this country have not developed the service culture. The banks have products, banks want to grow, banks want to lend, banks want to earn their margins, they want to show good books expansion and at the end of the year or end of the quarter, but they are not really particularly going after the customers and providing the necessary service that the customers are expecting. One reason for that is the banks have got into online business to provide internet facilities, telephone banking, mobile banking only fairly recently. It is developing. I mean, Sri Lanka is one of the countries in the regions where online banking, mobile banking is developed to a large extent thanks to the broadbanding services provided by the telcos in this country after privatization, some of them, and allowing them to come in.
Rani, on that, may I just interrupt you? I think one of the things you spoke about customers, I believe an opportunity for people is because I don't think banks know their customers well enough. Because today, you know, you target a market of one and not segments and so on, because there's enough material information out there for a bank to know me as Peter de Almeida. But there's very little work done on the whole area of analytics and customer sentiments that are being expressed in the social media and so on. Do you think there will be opportunity with analytics and customer insights, greater customer insights for banking, so that people who are in the IT industry might look at banking as to innovate in that space?
I would say yes, there are many opportunities for people to come and actually help the financial services industry in bringing in customer culture, new customer culture that is being required by the society now. Given the thick competition, however, at the moment in Sri Lanka, you can see banks are trying to compete and getting the same customer basically by offering 0.5% more than or 0.5% less than on the lendings. That's all they are doing. But really there's very limited research right now in the country, in the banking sector, to understand the customer. That's why in many instances we have been inviting Dun & Bradstreet to come, A.T. Kearney to come, or Maxwell Stamp to come, or somebody else to come, Boston Consultancies to come and help us. And there are so many Sri Lankans involved in these companies, and they bring in the new culture, new sales services, and also the way to look at the customer slightly differently than how we look at it. We always think the customer wants some loans and customer wants a little higher interest rate on deposit. That's all we think. That is not the way the customers are being looked at by the rest of the world. So that culture is now being brought in through some of these highly known international companies. I mean, there may be sometimes the audit companies who are providing these services. Accenture is one, and E&Y Worldwide, KPMG, they are providing all these services. So the exposure that most of the other country people, as also the Sri Lankans who have been working in these places, have acquired and possessed now, will be very useful at this moment in time to come to Sri Lanka and teach the bankers how to do them. When the banks grow to a certain level where you cannot laterally expand more into the market, then you suddenly get up and think, okay, I want to go to the region, can I go with this kind of professionalism and the service culture? Then we look towards those, and Sri Lanka's banking sector has reached that level. So
okay. Yeah, so on that, I would like to turn to you, Thilan, because firstly you can comment very briefly on whether you have seen a big growth change in the banking industry since you were at Sampath Bank, when you all were doing a fairly innovative stuff at that time. But my real question is this, because you're doing digital. Now, the banks are being disrupted, and I want to talk again about opportunities for folks. The payment system, today the banks, more than interest income, they are going after payments. Payments is where a substantial business of the banks lie. And interestingly, companies like Apple are making a play for this. Everyone knows about Apple's recent launch, the iPhone 6 and the Apple and the iWatch, but the real game was Apple Pay. So at the launch of Apple, there were designers, because Apple is a design company now, but also there were bankers, there were credit card companies, and there were retailers. Because Apple is formed a network of an ecosystem where they can use Apple Pay, and that will disrupt the traditional banking system. What are your thoughts, Thilan, on the emergence of digital in business? I just took the example of disruption in banking. Would you like to share with the audience the opportunities around digital across a few industries, disruptive type of opportunities that we can exploit in Sri Lanka?
I think we are just scratching the surface in terms of digitizing transactions, particularly monetary transactions in the country. And for us to fast track that process, Peter, I think also the regulators at the central bank need to cultivate a digital or a technology roadmap, so to speak. I'm not saying that it might not be there. You are also a former central bank. I'm sure you think you've done a lot of this. But there's got to be an element of both the regulator and the industry working hand in glove with say a 5-year, 10-year view. Let's say take a 5-year, 10 years, it's virtually a millennium in technology, on how to nurture the industry to move towards digitization. Now, within the framework of the banking circles, there's always those who want to hold back because they fear change. There are banks, particularly the state banks, who are quite staid and conservative, who want to maintain status quo. I recall during the early days of the formation of Sampath Bank, there were significant resistance in obtaining certain approvals from the central bank at that time, particularly when it came to offering interest on a simple thing like a checking account or opening ATMs. Sampath Bank was the first to open ATMs. So looking at the future, just to give a snapshot of the future, being the chairman of a Dialog-owned subsidiary company, one of the things that the telcos, particularly Dialog, is looking at is creating a separate ecosystem to bring in innovation in digital transactions. As you're aware, Dialog's created Easy Cash. So buying into digital commerce was part of that whole process of ensuring that the digital money, the digital transaction process would actually get fast-tracked in the country. So we're still at the beginning of it. And again, I think Dialog is also looking at this industry as being an incubator, looking at themselves investing in ventures that have potential to grow, and then infusing that into maybe a larger ecosystem so that there can be synergies between one business and another in this whole digital ecospace.
Thank you. Harsha, now you have, made a bet on building this car, right? What type of person do you need to make this venture successful? What is the core competency that you look for? Firstly, in the design of the car, and then obviously as you go through the cycle of production and all of that. But just for the audience to understand how they can engage with a company like you, what is that core competency that you need right now in this phase of development? You can talk about which phase of development you are in the electric car, and what kind of core competencies are you looking for?
Actually, again, same thing. I'm looking for some crazy...
apart from crazy people.
Yeah, that has to be the crazy
people. A little more specific, yes. What kind of crazy?
Now, the reason I told you about the crazy people is this. Because people who really believe in what they're doing is the craziness that we are looking for. Most of the time, even in our history, the success of Cogen is also innovation, 100% innovation. Because we created something nobody ever had it before. So today, unlike before, today, anybody, if they want to learn something, they only need a computer and internet and Google maybe, or any other search engine to find the information. So information freely available. So if you look at the car itself, we didn't have anybody who actually built a car. I I mean, they're not even retrofit, but somebody has actually rebuilt a car, not retrofitting car either. So we had all these guys that who actually joined, apart from one guy who actually designed the car. He's actually only automobile car designer. It's called Dash. He's actually the guy who actually designed the look and feel of the car. And apart from that, the rest of the guys who never worked on the cars before. So what they did was
But they have some core strength in
yeah, they
engine
have core
manufacturing
strength.
or what?
Yeah,
What
so
is
one
it?
guy is very good in aerodynamic shapes.
Aerodynamics, yeah.
So one guy is very good in car shapes and how to design the car,
Right.
because it has to be designed it properly to withstand the speeds that we are looking at.
Right.
And there are people that who are very good in, by Beshan, who was there in the previous session, is very good in electronics and firmware and stuff like that. And there are so many guys like them that we have about 5 to 10 people who are expert in certain domains, but not in every single thing. But then also the other guys who are actually working day in and day out, they learn a lot of things from the internet. They do the studies, they look at a lot of videos, they look at a lot of the papers, transaction papers that has been done, publications that has been done. They look at all that and they actually model it. There are very good guys who are actually very good in modeling it. So we had those kind of guys as well, young, fresh graduates who came out from the university. So one of the things, those guys also had the same thing. As soon as we finish a degree, we want to go there and do a degree, a master's or PhD in Australia or Canada or somewhere else. I said, hold on a minute. You know, what's the purpose of going and doing a master's degree? Who give a basically damn about it?
Okay.
Let's build a car first, and then you go there and do the master's later.
Right, that's interesting. Now, so are you saying then that they are not necessarily coming to work with you because you can, I mean, an aerodynamics engineer will you know, demand a certain you know, value for his contribution.
Yeah.
So you are not competing with them by saying that I can offer you a pay equivalent to what you would earn supposing you worked for Porsche or something like that. Yeah. Is it that the driving force, the motivation for them is to be engaged in a new venture, or are you also able to match that with compensation that will, you know, be equivalent or, you know, in parity with the translated number for Sri Lanka?
Right. No, certainly not, because thing is like this is the first time Sri Lanka ever tried to build an electric supercar from the scratch. So the thing is like this is like a not a Vega thing, this is like not a cogent thing, it's like a Sri Lankan achievement. Okay. So because of that, every single person want to be part of it. That is it. I mean, you don't know, every single day I get about like 5 or 6 guys added into my Facebook, for some Twitter or some to LinkedIn and things like that. There are all, every single person want to be part of it. They want to volunteer it. And some people are writing actually songs. Some people are doing some music. Some people are, it's amazing. It's amazing how these young guys are. And recently, there's some guys turn up in the doorstep and they said, we just gave up the job and we want to work here free of charge. I said, okay. So likewise, there are so much, the enthusiasm that has been built because it's made in Sri Lanka, and the first ever that is somebody is trying for that, that is the one that actually kicks the whole thing off.
I
just want to add to that, yes.
Sorry, make a quick comment. Just to point out that the innate mathematical and scientific ability of Sri Lankans, whether they are graduates or not, is quite remarkable, and we need crazy people like Harsha to harness that. I can just give you very shortly one example of a Swedish gentleman who's now just turned 80, started a business called Aerosense in Kadawatha, and a bunch of engineers who were just exposed to the aspect of aviation sensors came back to Sri Lanka, sat across a table for about 6 to 8 months and designed a system that won a 19-year contract, a sensor system that won a 19-year contract with British Aerospace, which will be used in the next generation of aircraft from the Boeing 350s that will run the joystick, which is now currently 2 hands where you pull the plane forward. It will be just like a joystick, and the sensor that drives that has been designed in Kadawatha by Sri Lankan engineers. So what's remarkable about that story is that with people like Harsha, with people like Rune Flynn from Sweden coming to Sri Lanka to harness the talent that we have with the right capital, with the right management skills, the sky is the limit.
But Thilan, but the point is, and I'm shifting gears a little bit here, the point is there are so few of those in Sri Lanka, and this is where I believe now where we are different to India, because the idea is to attract, I mean, I don't want to be disparaging about the type of people we need. Like Shiromal said, we need people across the industry, but we also need to make this transformation. We need to have very smart people. Now, countries like India are doing something very specific in this space. And Rani, I know you had a point about implementation, we'll come to that. But I'd just like to talk about just, India, the Department of Science and Technology, they have put together several initiatives like the Ramanujan Fellowship, the Innovation in Science Pursuit for Inspired Research, INSPIRE, and the Ramalinga Swami Fellowship. Now, each of these are to entice top scientists to India. And I believe in the last 7 years, India has attracted 500 scientists, only 6 of whom have gone back. Now, they paid something like 75,000 Indian rupees per month, and they give them a research grant of 5 lakhs per year for 5 years. Now, don't you think we need, and Rani, you can comment on this because you've been part of government policy and so on, don't you think it requires a significant investment of this nature to move from this odd little thing that we do and have 1 or 2 people coming and pat ourselves on the back and say what a wonderful job we are doing, to really shifting gears and going after those really smart Sri Lankans who are happy to come back provided there is an opportunity and a space for them in fundamental research. Thilan, you want to comment on that, and then maybe Rani can speak about it because you've been
Yes, absolutely. I'll be very brief. Sri Lanka needs to become a magnet for attracting talent, and that requires, again, policymakers to be very proactive in following, say, some of the practices followed by Singapore, which attracts scientists and people who actually are able to develop patentable products, etc. Also, we need to be a hotbed of entrepreneurship. We need to have more venture capital funds. Again, the financial services industry is linked to this. So yes, we need to create that entire, I don't want to use the word Silicon Valley, but Sri Lanka's own indigenous ecosystem that allows us to attract talent, whether it's from rural Sri Lanka or rural Minneapolis in the US, to come here, innovate, be able to access capital, be able to access the universities to create businesses that would become the future multi-billion-dollar businesses which are homegrown. We just don't have enough of them. I agree with you.
And so there has to be some kind of government intervention.
There has to be a policy direction that would attract, where Sri Lanka becomes a magnet for attracting talent. Yeah. And we need to do a lot more in that area.
Okay. On that, Rani, before you take the question, I would like to, since you're an economist, I was very interested in the book that's written by Joseph Stiglitz, who is the former chief economist of the World Bank. Very interesting point he makes: creating a learning society, a new approach to growth, development, and social progress, where he argues that increasing learning is going to be the future, not the old economist view of efficient allocation of resources, but rather the creation, dissemination, and utilization of knowledge. And he firmly believes that this should be part of economic policy. So it's an economic point of view. Now, you have been in the central bank for many years. Has there been any discussion on a subject like this, and really to direct government policy towards something of this nature? And is there something we can do? That's the point I want to make.
Yeah. There have been some attempts made in the past, and certainly they are not adequate at all. I mean, as Thilan says, over and over by various governments, the attention paid to research, development, and making Sri Lanka a learning center and disseminating even the indigenous knowledge that we have acquired historically has not taken place. I mean, a lot more has to be done. From the central bank's research point of view, they have been investing people and inculcating all the time the learning culture. So that is very much confined only to the economic subjects and the financial services delivery. When it comes to the private sector or the government-initiated research and development programs are far and few between. That is certainly not adequate to this stage of development. What is attempted more recently is to provide this knowledge through the knowledge hub concept. That is one of the key hubs that is cutting across.
Yes, but I'm sorry to interrupt again, but we are talking about a knowledge hub, and again I want to create a balanced view. I mean, we have heard all the positive things. I also want to show what the challenges are, so that organizations like Work in Sri Lanka can seriously address them. Now, we are talking about a knowledge hub, but look at the spending on education. Now, we'll come to the type of education needed. That's a second point, and I'll quickly, I've got about 8 minutes before we turn it on to the audience for 30 minutes. The spend in India on education over the last 3 years, 2010, 11, 12, 3.3, 3.4, 3.4% of GDP. Sri Lanka over the last 37 years had the highest in 1996 of 3.34. But over the last 3 years, the same numbers as India, 2010, 11, 12, it's 2, 2, and 1.7. Now, what do you think about that? Shouldn't there be a greater effort to invest in, particularly in higher learning? You know, because the quality of people we are producing in the universities are not essentially, I believe, you know, supporting this whole idea of drawing the smart brains back to Sri Lanka, and also to prevent the ones who are in Sri Lanka to leave. And I'll come to some numbers on that. You just want to.
Yeah, you are right. I mean, I fully endorse what Joseph Stiglitz has written in his book. I mean, basically, a learning center has to be created in this country for us.
A learning center?
Yes,
okay.
A learning center. That learning center just doesn't fall off the sky. The policy makers, the regulators, the higher educationists, as well as the private sector, all should get together and come up with a clear plan which sets out all key elements of that. I mean, go back to the knowledge hub concept. In that, there are various elements. There are various elements in it, and so primary education, secondary education, and tertiary education are one component. And a lot of attention has now been paid to ensure that the curriculum is changed, the school, all the subjects that are more oriented towards industrial requirements and the service requirements, the curriculum is being changed. At the same time, I mean, if you have heard, a couple of years ago, Sri Lanka was selected as a good location for IT BPOs and KPOs, and that still prevails. And for that,
because that also is a fairly low value proposition, right?
It was a low value proposition.
It's not a creative, you know, creating value like digital and so on.
Well, the industry has been only less than $500 million. Now, the industry has actually reached $1 billion altogether in the last couple of years. But we still need to develop and come up with IT BPO relevant service providers.
Okay.
So that means we still don't have the universities or the school leavers coming up with this kind of talents. As a result, there's a quick program that is being implemented by the higher education, which is called the conversion program, where you take some of the school leavers as well as the graduates who are coming up with different subjects, who are being given orientation to get into the ICT area. Particularly those graduates who have the maths and the English background, they pick up on that. Because hundreds and hundreds of IT BPO trainees are being required by the ICT industry, and lots of Indian, Chinese, Korean investors are coming and asking for 500, 600s, which we are not in a position to do. Coming back to the knowledge center question, or the knowledge hub question, we are now trying to actually collect the indigenous knowledge that is spread across the country, which have been able to add value to the Sri Lankan growth.
I'm sorry to interrupt again, Rani, but the next question I had, you're leading straight to that, about indigenous knowledge and not really exploiting it. Because we know the old irrigation system that was very scientific, and the whole system, you know, in the north central province of irrigation and all that. And that's tied to my next point that I was going to draw, about opportunities. Are we providing opportunities for Sri Lankan specialists? Take roads, for example. We don't design roads anymore. They are all designed by Chinese. Bridges are designed by Chinese. And in the IT, it's the Indian companies that come to Sri Lanka and do all of this. So are we creating, and I'd like to throw this to someone else because I don't want you to be in the spot. Harsha, I'd like to turn the spotlight away from Rani to you. Do you think that we are providing opportunities for fundamental work? I mean, surely we build roads, and you know, we are smart engineers who can build.
I want to correct you. It's Chinese money that hires Sri Lankan engineers who design the roads. Sri Lankan engineers are better road designers, better building designers. I can vouch for this.
So the Norachole power plant was designed by Sri Lankan engineers.
No. I'm talking of roads.
Okay. Because I was a little worried because it was failing about 8 or 10 times, and if you do that to your car business, I think you'll be in deep trouble. So just give us your thoughts on that. Just to provide more and more opportunity for Sri Lankan workers, even those who are, you know, we know Chinese workers are deployed here.
Most of the time, one of the very good things is about even if you take the government sector. Right. So if you go to the government sector, any area, education or something like that, I was one of these guys banging on about 6% has to be more than 6%, put it on education. So once you go inside the university, because I work very closely with the universities, and every single university very closely with that, including the NEC as well, and trying to recently. and trying to see what is happening, because I personally believe that we need to do an entire change in the entire education system. The entire education system has to be changed, from primary education, secondary education to higher education. It has to be changed. But I'm a guy that I think they should ditch A level and come up with something new.
Yeah.
Why do we go behind this education of about white man long time ago given it to us about
And system of
55,
testing
60 years ago, and we are banging the same thing again and again and again and again and again, and then they say A level, O level. A level is absolutely useless, so somebody has to change it. So now the government, most of the guys, even England is changing it, right? England is changing it, we are not changing it. So that's what we are trying to do. In order to change it, who is going to do that particular job? The problem is we don't have the expertise who can actually go there and get the 6% of that GDP and say, okay, I'm going to take this out of this 6%, I'm going to take $50 million and I'm going to do this. I'm going to take another $50 million and I'm going to do that. If you look at in the university grants as well, most of the grants come in and they go back. They go back. Some of the grants come in, they go back because they don't have any ideas what to do with that particular grant. So that's the thing that why we need so many expertise in Sri Lanka in order to change that.
Right. So on that question, Harsha, now I understand that we can't change government policy in a hurry. Maybe people like Rani can still have influence. But I agree with you, because Einstein did say imagination is more important than knowledge. And interestingly, on your point, IBM did a survey based on 300 CEOs and asked them what are their priorities as they face the future. And interestingly, top of mind was not mathematics or any of that stuff, not economics or anything, but creativity.
Yeah.
And schools do not teach creativity.
No.
Also, and I pose this to you, Sarinder, when you hire people, do you look for people who are creative?
Absolutely, and not just creative from an artistic point of view, because we do employ designers, but when we look for somebody, because when you get, say for example, you put an ad out for a industrial engineer, you get 300 people with the same qualification. So what you are looking for is that X factor, somebody to come in with something different, to offer something different. You are looking for somebody with a more than just a paper qualification, to be more well-rounded, and at the interview, you try to suss out whether that person has what it takes to think outside what they have been taught in a canned form in the education system.
But is that true? Do companies actually do that,
Well, I think it varies from company to company, Pete. I don't know whether that's one brush paints everybody, but it certainly does hold true for us, and that's something that we spend a lot of time on in terms of learning our skills and trying to get more skillful in our interviewing procedure.
Would you like to share with the audience, like what kind of attributes do you look for? Because creativity is a big brush to paint with, right?
Yeah, absolutely. You try to see how well-rounded the person is in terms of what they bring to the table apart from their qualification. What are their interests? What's their general knowledge? What's their common sense? How have they dealt with other people in a work environment, in a school environment? Have they been a part of a team? Have they been a part of some other creative thing, like maybe speech and drama, or whatever? You just try to see what else that person is bringing to the table, whether it's a well-rounded package.
Shiromal, do you conscientiously follow that? Do you tell your managers, guys, look, we need to hire people who are, because again, Rani, the question of Arcadia Kuhlman, he said, I don't want to hire bankers because, I hire dancers, musicians, artists, painters, and that's how we built that savings. Shiromal, do you honestly do that? Because the ads that we see in papers say 20 years experience in a bank, hotel, and you get the same old.
You have missed the ads.
I'm sorry, those are not your ads.
Yeah,
So,
well, we particularly look for the attitude. Attitude is an important thing for our recruitment, because we feel that if a person doesn't have the right attitude to serve someone, it's going to be very tough. Because once we get a person with the right attitude, it's easier to train them on the other skills that are needed. So, yeah, we do need people who are creative, who can do something different. But once they have the right attitude, then it becomes easier to train them.
He asked a question. Have you ever, climbed a coconut tree?
Oh, you do that?
That's my main question.
So that's very specific.
Yeah, if you never tried a coconut tree, then you can't do anything about it. So thank you very much.
I can get halfway up the coconut. So I might get a job there. Halfway is okay, no?
Halfway is half price.
we also tend to ask very abstract questions. Don't really, really talk too much about the specifics of the technical side of it can come next.
Right.
You know,
Tinan, you deal with a lot of young people in the, in your wow.lk. What are you seeing out there so that people have an idea of what they should be? What kind of attributes are you? Particularly yours is a very creative area, right?
Yes, I mean the average age of the company is 26,
Okay.
excluding me.
Yeah.
But what I actually look for is initiative, going that extra mile, cutting through the clutter and going to the source of the problem. So I'm noticing very interesting cultural traits as well. I mean, when it comes to a company like wow.lk, where we've got virtually equal proportion of Sinhalese, Muslims, and other ethnicities, and it's the reason for the success. And we find that certain people with certain backgrounds are better at the creative side of the business. Certain people have a better knack to going and doing the trade, the sourcing aspect of it. So, I mean, I'd like to maybe end by just mentioning an anecdote in terms of harnessing of our talent, and that is, people have asked me, Thilan, what made Sri Lanka win the Cricket World Cup in 1996? I didn't quite know the answer, but the answer came to me about a couple of weeks after someone asked me that question. And that is because a few years earlier, during the tenure of a former president of the Board of Control, Gamini Disanayake, he created the environment where Sri Lankan, regardless of which school he went to, which background he came from, which ethnicity, had an equal opportunity of qualifying for the national team. They were given the tools to make sure that they had an equal opportunity. And that is what this country needs. We need to equip our young people with the required tools to take advantage of the capitalist system or whatever economic system we have created. And unless and until we do that, talent is not going to be unearthed, and we are going to be a suboptimal, mediocre country just happening to be trudging along the same old path that we're going. I completely agree with you. We need to scuttle the O-level and A-level system.
Yeah, thank you. Time for questions from the audience, please. There's a gentleman right here who put his hand up, and we can have the mic sent to him. You could mention your name and where you come from, just so that audience gets a feel of who is asking the questions, but it's not compulsory.
It's on.
Hi, my name is Shehan De Silva. I was actually in the panel in the morning. From Slintech, a senior scientist and leading the strategic planning activity. Two-part thing here. First is a comment. I think you were trying to get at what's unique about the types of personalities who we're trying to or attract. Personally, I've felt that they have to have two attributes. One is a creativity, like you always mentioned, and one is to develop relationships. Now, these two are inherently, they don't yield itself to being automated, right? So you'll never be out of a job if you get into these areas, relationships and creativity. Now, how do you get a handle on these things is basically you look for sort of a personality, right? A deep insight into your core competency and the ability to apply it across the board. Now, this hasn't been transferred to us in our curriculum in school because we are all generalizing. We want to splatter our CVs with all these different wide and varied things for universities or whatever it is. So we're not trained, we're actually trained not to do this. So that's simply sort of a comment. Now, my sort of question is, we are trying to develop entrepreneurship. Slintech is also trying to achieve this. A lot of you also are part of this sort of movement in Sri Lanka. Something we see is venture capital, right? Venture capital is non-accessible, but there's something simple we can do, right? Crowdfunding sources are available. Some of these ideas that we have immediately need to be relevant in the global space, so we can use crowdfunding to do this. Unfortunately, the simple thing of having a PayPal account active to pay someone in Sri Lanka is not there, right? So you're trying to get VCs there. Okay, fine. That's a huge activity. Fine. Let's say okay, it takes a couple of years. But to get a simple PayPal account to pay inward to a person who's providing a service from Sri Lanka is not there. I moved back about 5 years ago. The talk was that it was going to come online in the next year or so. It's still not online. So with that, I want to maybe.
Thank you. Would someone like to comment on that? Rani, would you know anything about any regulation, central bank or otherwise that's inhibit? Is it a regulatory issue?
It is a regulatory issue at the moment. I don't think the decision has taken to allow companies like PayPal to expedite these payments across the borders. But there are several initiatives taken by the regulators, particularly allowing the telco bank models, and telco-only models are not allowed as yet, like in Kenya's M-Pesa or Philippines' GCash models. But in time to come, the telcos are definitely going to overtake the payments position in this country, and PayPal has been making inquiries. There are some regulatory issues with the PayPal because PayPal is incorporated in Europe, not as a bank, and they act as a bank. It's incorporated as a company, but they have given all the powers to act as a bank. But in some countries, they are being given the banking status. So the question is what kind of status they're going to give, and I think they're considering and discussing it, and at some stage or the other, they probably would be allowing this kind of companies to come in and work. The scenario at the moment is, okay, the telcos are really dynamic, very creative, and then they're providing banking services rather than going through the banks. So whether the banks are going to live in the Jurassic Park area and still do the same thing, or are they going to pal up with the telcos and get a cut out of that and try to do at least the custodian of these services?
Thank you. There's a gentleman over there.
Next question from here.
My name is Anton, and I'm here from the UK. A question to Dr. Jayama. I work in the financial services sector back in the UK, and you mentioned in your introduction that you need people because you want to innovate. You don't want to make money by a rate 0.5%, 50 bips up here, 50 bips down there. My question is, what's the incentive? Why do you want to innovate? Because I look at Sri Lankan banks, you look at the balance sheets and the profit and loss accounts, ticking along nicely. Your share price is ticking along nicely. Your profitability is fine. The company I work for back in the UK, Fidelity Investments, is currently undergoing a huge replatforming exercise, 150 million pounds. The reason for that is we've just realized, despite being a big player, there are small guys starting up who are much more nimble on their feet than this big fund house being there for 70 years. So, we've been given the license to make losses for about 5 years, but turn the company around, make sure it's, future-proofed, and so that we can add revenue, because we've seen our revenues drop, market share drop, customer NPS scores, the satisfaction scores drop. So there's investment going in. What's the incentive, and what has HNB got, and not just HNB, any other bank for that matter, got in their pipelines as the next big thing that you think is going to either competitively put you ahead of your competitors, so that whoever is trying to come here is not going to find out 2 years down the line that we're smacking our heads against a brick wall, where our companies are very comfortable just ticking along what they're doing. Thank you.
Yes, Rani.
Several factors contribute to this, and actually speaking, Sri Lanka's banking sector also has been quite stable over the last couple of years while the world was having so much of turbulence in the financial services industry, including UK, Europe and US. So in that sense, of course, the stability has been maintained, so that's a good plus factor for us. And at the same time, now the banking sector is coming to a level where you have to go to the regions and you have to be open to the global investors, global bankers, and also to global transactions. In that sense, you will have to relax some of the financial services regulations and open up. When you open up, you need this innovative thinking, you need this professionalism. You can't just open up and then get the smaller size banks be swallowed by the big giants that are going to come into this country. For example, under the financial services, so far we have not opened the insurance industry. You can see, the day the insurance industry is open, we have to be ready to compete with the other industries. I mean, at the moment, Sri Lankan insurance companies are not in a position to compete even with the Indian insurance companies. I mean, two big giants coming in will swallow half of it. And the fact that recently we have bifurcated the general and life insurance into two, the 15 companies have now multiplied to 30, and nobody is going to survive in this market. So as a result of that, the financial services industry is still restrained by very many regulations. The moment you open it, you really have to be on innovation, you have to be very professional, and you have to consolidate and become very strong. In that context, there is a need for Sri Lankan banking and financial services sector to consolidate, merge, grow big, and as well as to look for new vistas, and at the same time to bring innovation and productivity increases. So there is a case for it right now, and particularly if you are going towards becoming a middle income emerging market, we don't want to get trapped at the level where Thailand and Malaysia to some extent have come into now. So if Sri Lanka is to continue with this growth, you have to bring the value addition from financial services, and there is the competition you have to face.
But running on growth and disincentives, isn't this big spread that the banks enjoy acting as a clear disincentive to, because this is the probably one of the few countries in the world that has spreads of like 6, 7, 8%. Well, let's say 5%, where in India it's sub 1%. So what is, and also the reason I'm asking this is not to have a discussion on banking, but because as a result of this, the banks are not funding some of these startups and so on. We all speak about this, but the banks are the most backward.
Yeah.
And at extremely exorbitant rates, these startups can't survive and scale. They can start up, but they can't scale.
Yes, it used to be a historical phenomena. It is not going to be the case in the future,
Okay.
simply because since the banks are voluntarily not reducing the spreads, because they wanted to keep so many layers of people, so many structures, so many responsibilities up and down. So as a result of this, you need layers and layers and layers of positions, and you were not restructuring, you were looking at the human resource requirements of a bank of any size. As a result, the regulators have forced it on us now.
Okay.
The interest rate regime has been brought down voluntarily as well as forcibly now, as you can see it, and the spreads have come half of it compared to what it was earlier. So the banks are being forced to think of non-interest income now, which is the fee-based income, investment incomes, and also all kinds of service income. So as a result of that, banks are forced to do that, and this huge spread phenomena is not going to prevail in the future, and we will be getting more closer to
That's comforting. That's comforting. Yes, do I see a hand going up?
Yes, Himali here has a question.
Hi, I'm Himali De Silva, and I head up operations and technology for a disruptive technology company in Singapore. So my question is more like an observation as well. I kind of feel that we might be missing a beat. We're talking about Sri Lanka being a big technology hotbed and trying to attract people back. Now, when I decided to go into technology 10 years ago, my parents were not happy because culturally, doctor, lawyer, accountant. Also, they have no clue about how much the pay scales are, the transferability of the skills. So my sister chose to be a doctor. I choose to go into technology. I got all grief. 10 years later, I've lived in 6 countries, earn a lot more, and I can come home, where for her, she'll have to come and do a lot of exams and stuff as well. So are we missing a beat because we're not educating like the teachers and the generation of parents about what technology is? It's not just coders and programmers. There's business analysts, there's project managers. There's so much scope. Your salary scales, how much you can do with it. So I just wanted your opinion on that.
Please, please.
Because I had this problem all the time. The biggest problem that we have is actually the parents.
Yep.
Because,
And the teachers, of course.
And the teachers, of course, but mainly the parents.
Yeah.
So one of the problems that I said, even if you, I mean, there are so many people answer different questions as well regarding to this parents' opinion. Our parents are very opinionated, right? So they have so many opinions. One of the greatest thing I always say is like I was actually, I went to one of these parties and I was hearing, some middle-aged guys were talking, and my son is in Australia, my son is in America.
Don't say middle-aged guys like that. I mean, I am 56, don't be disparaging.
So young guys, right? Young guys talking about where their sons and daughters and stuff like that. And I was thinking, like, where did they study? They studied in Sri Lanka, they went abroad. And I said, are you proud of that? I said, of course, we went to Australia, we visited at that time. And I said, don't you realize that you actually stolen money, your children have stolen money from this country because it's a free education that they have actually got. Using that free education, they educated themselves. And then after that paying anything back, instead of paying anything back, they actually buggered off to Australia or Canada or Middle East or something like that. And now you are so happy, my son is a rogue, my son is a rogue, and my son is a rogue, and stuff like that. That is a rogue in theory. But similarly, that is what exactly our parents' attitudes are. Our parents' attitude, if I go and ask my mother, I want to be a project manager, and my mother will say, what? Right? Project manager is the one that you can make a lot of money in this country, as you said. Right? Senior software engineers, BAs, and all these guys can make so much of money in this country right now. Unfortunately, to educate the parents, there is no program in this country. Whereas I think, these kind of conferences or something like that, don't you have this educating for Sri Lankan parents or something like that? I mean, that will make a huge difference in this country because even Molan was thing, one of the guys who came to me as a software engineer, he got, the father sent it to me and said that, why don't you, take him, just pass A-level. During waiting for the results, he came to me and I said, okay, we teach you how to do programming and we teach you how to go and do commercial programming. So he was doing a brilliant job, absolutely intelligent guy. And then he was doing all this Java programming, some C classes and C++ and stuff like that. And then halfway through one day, he was going at about 4 o'clock. I said, where are you going? And he goes, I'm going to go to CIMA class. And I said, CIMA class? So why are you going for CIMA class for? And he said, no, my father actually put me to a CIMA class, right? So I thought you are going to be a software engineer. Why do you want CIMA for? No. And my father insisted to me. I said, don't go. If you want to be an engineer, you become an engineer. You don't need CIMA. Only problem you have is like your father does not trust you. Your father does not trust you. In case if you fail on this, you have backup as an accountant. If you fail on that, you have backup as a lawyer. I'm pretty sure the father will send you to 3 or 4 courses. So those kind of people, it's extremely difficult to educate them. So I think I don't listen to my mother or father or whoever else. They just come this way and go on the other side. And if I listen to them, I would never do anything. So
what I also feel is the process of evolution. Things are, if you take the last 25, 30 years, there was little incentive for people to stay on here and do anything apart from the doctor, lawyer, accountant, and the professional jobs. But now, with all this new innovation coming in, with all the technology coming into Sri Lanka, I mean, there are companies like WSO2, there are companies like Virtusa, Millennium IT, there are all these companies that are now creating this new environment that I feel even parents are gradually going to change. I'm a parent of a teenage son who, not teenage, my God, they were teenagers a long time ago, sorry. One just graduated university and his options were global, but he's back here working for Virtusa, and I'm very proud of that. And I spent a bloody fortune on his education, but it's still good to have him back home working here, and I can see great career prospects for him here. So I think it's a generational thing. I think it's going to change. After all, my father still thinks I'm a glorified tailor, but and the fact that I drive a nicer car than him hasn't helped. Yeah. It's a generation thing. I think it'll change over time. And if you really think about it, this country has really started gathering traction and moving forward quite fast only in the last 5 or 6 years.
Thilan, I think you want to make a comment.
Quick comment. I think one way of solving that problem is take your parents to your workplace.
Yeah.
And I'm sure MAS does this, but I'm also on the board of SLIIT, Sri Lanka's largest IT university, not-for-profit. I was one of the co-founders. We have Parents' Day, and a lot of the graduation speeches on Parents' Day actually get disseminated, and I can see the change. Where today we have 5,000 students. I mean, Harsha thinks that all of them are not of the same quality of University of Moroto, but it was about volume. But nevertheless, I think that's the best way of getting the message across to parents, and I agree with also what you say.
But I don't know, Sarinder, whether things have really changed. Look at the Shishatva exam.
Oh my God.
I mean, the amount of, standardized testing that put these children through, it has got worse, I can tell you.
That I think is the education system that we were talking about earlier.
So I don't think that we can deal with that today. So we'll have more questions from the audience. Yes, the gentleman right in front here.
Yeah, I'm Darshan De Silva. I run a small biomedical research lab in Sri Lanka, non-profit research lab. One of the comments I have is, by the way, I agree with the parent issue. I actually talk to the parents of people that I hire. because it is an issue, but you have to deal with them. Their parents are still old. But anyway, moving on to your comment about spending more, government spending more. I happen to sit on a couple of National Science Foundation panels, and what we are seeing is, yes, the government is interested in putting in more money. People talk about it, but we don't have the capacity to absorb it. I sit on the biotechnology panel. I forget, 2-3 years back, we had 12 grants, we could only fund 3 because they're not written right. We know they're not practical to execute. So earlier it was we just rejected, but now we are trying to train them, the people, basically the new young scientists which have come in, and to slowly build. So people criticize saying, yeah, we need more than the 0.2% that we are trying to spend, but the problem is we don't have the absorption capacity. So for that, I have been saying you give more money to the private sector. Now I'm in the private sector, but until recently, the government never gave research grants to the private sector. I mean, and then on top of that, I get money from the US, research money. I'm given 8%, 20% overhead. The Sri Lankan government, they refuse to give any overhead at all. I mean, how can you so? These are the sorts of practical problems that we need to slowly address bit by bit. But then one of the things is that on a lot of the government panels, we don't have the critical mass of scientists who are actually working in people like Shehan here and them. And even if they're there, I mean, we don't take them in. When I was first put on the panel after I came, they said I was not old enough. Luckily, I'm a little older now, but still, you know, that was a silly comment made, and actually it was a barrier to be, you know, until. So I think we need to change some of those mindsets. They are slowly changing, but unfortunately it's happening slowly. So until we fix certain things, we can't really just throw money at it and expect the government to.
No, that is why the Department of Biology, Biotechnology in India, they have some well thought out programs. In fact, they have a program with Wellcome Group.
Yes, I know. I actually talked with the head of this. Interesting. I was in US. I met the head of Wellcome Fund.
So there
and
you go.
I asked him. Yes. I asked him. Now you're doing this in India, so it's a private partnership actually. I said, why don't you come to Sri Lanka? So then he first sat down and he asked, okay, why do you want? Because he knew I had US funding and all that. Then I said, no. He said, we actually did this earlier with Sri Lanka. We've put in a lot of money, Wellcome Fund, and our returns were very poor. A lot of the grants that have come into Sri Lanka, they're not properly executed because we don't have the management skills. I actually do a number of projects with the Ministry of Health. And one of the reasons they like working with me is because I'm in the private sector and I've been able to help them. Of course, it's not something which is very lucrative and all that, but that is, I think, we all touched on it. So this is one reason. So Wellcome Trust, they actually told me, you go to India and you talk with them, learn from them, and then we'll start coming. I have a full-time job. I can't do that. It's something that the government has to do. But these are things that slowly have to happen if we are to really move.
But the question is, do we have that kind of professionalism? And I want to save one last question to really have the professional level, and I'll talk about this to you, Thilan, because you talk about headhunting those days and the complete reverse of what we are seeing today in key government institutions. But I think, thank you for your comment. Thank you very much.
But the thing is, like in your question about this biochemical engineering is actually getting very popular now in Sri Lanka because they started something called KDU Care. I don't know whether you know.
I am aware,
So you're working there as well?
No, but I know them, and the thing is this. I fully agree, we have a lot of very base talent. It's very good. But mid-level, especially in the areas like biomedical sciences, we don't pay enough and we can't keep people. I have trained a few, actually I have a person who is completing a PhD, she's migrating. So this is at the mid-level, we have a serious problem, and I can't speak for all the professions, but in biomedical sciences, both in the universities and outside, it's a huge problem.
So this is actually, as you said, I think it's better than my bet is on chemical science, chemistry, and also biochemistry, and also on material science. Those are the 3 areas Sri Lanka should actually concentrate quite a lot. I mean, software and electronics are there, but this is much
I absolutely agree, and there is actually a government
plan. Those are multi-billion-dollar products. Actually.
There is a government 5-year plan which has a lot of these things put in. It was done by the former Science and Technology Minister. but I was also participating, but I see problems in execution of this. It is ambitious, but I don't know if we have and we can get, and we actually had a plan to bring people back. NSF, they were paying about 1 lakh, up to 1 lakh to get scientists back to work in Sri Lanka with some money for research funds. For some
KD
reason,
is trying about 300,000, right?
yes, KDU, yes. But so that is the next success. But let's see. But NSF tried it; it didn't really work. It happened about a few years back. Yeah. So
Thank you.
I think
We have about 2.5 minutes, about 3 minutes more. Any other questions from the audience? There's a gentleman there who is, yeah.
Hi, good evening. My name is Dineshka, and I'm one of these crazy guys who works for Cogen and who believed in Harsha's craziness and came back to Sri Lanka about 2 years back. So my question is to Thilan specifically, but anyone is welcome to answer it. Yes, you talked about biomedical, but we being in the IT industry and we as a country has done tremendously well in this sector, but my real question is, yes, we have done really well in the B2B area, but not a single company as of yet has been able to really dominate the global sector in the B2C area. You know, we as a company is trying out few things, but my question is to Thilan, in your opinion, since you are now involved in the WOW and all this B2C area, and I believe, you know, B2C and mobile has a great potential, and probably it's the future that will drive a lot of revenue to the country. So in your opinion, what are the things would you believe, what are the key ingredients that entrepreneurs or the established organization require to cultivate within themselves to become truly successful in the B2C arena, I mean in global?
globally or
Global, because in what I see is, what I see even with the WOW and all, you know, yes, we are doing well, but I think Sri Lankan market as of yet is not that big to have a huge impact. So we need to definitely go beyond Sri Lanka if we are to make a real dent in the world. So if that's the case, in your opinion, what are the key ingredients or criteria or success criteria that we need to cultivate to achieve that? I know it's a kind of a vague question.
looking at the clock, but I'll be very quick. On the B2C aspect of, from a wow.lk perspective, the biggest challenge is attitudinal change and change of behavioral patterns by consumers to move from bricks and mortar shopping experiences to mobile or online. And we believe we are right at the beginning of it. Sri Lanka can adapt technology, but there are cultural, language, economic barriers to achieving that. And that's something that we are focusing on. How do we take this business model to rural Sri Lanka? And we're trying several business models to make sure that the benefits of online B2C can permeate through the rural community so that we become a more efficient economy as a result. For us to look at it from a global aspect, again, policymakers have to play an active role, because Sri Lanka being ideally located both as a shipping and an aviation hub, I mean, that whole aspect has to be looked at from the context of attracting the right type of investment and having, to add on to your point, the right type of people in public service. I think that's what's lacking and absolutely crucial. We need to have the right person in the right position in public service, even if it means paying market rates. When I was headhunted to become chairman of the BOI, I was told that the government would match my salary. Then I told, no, that might be too controversial, but I was still paid 100,000 rupees a month way back in 1996, simply to leave my position at Asia Capital and work for the government. And I believe that with me, a whole team of investment bankers came into government, about 16 of them, who were accounting for about 40% of the foreign direct investment that came into the country. So that's the sort of bold step that we as a country need to take to achieve what everyone's talking about here.
Okay, time's up, I'm afraid, and I would like to ask one last question, Thilan, because you touched on it now and you spoke about it earlier. This is all down to professionalism. Fact of the matter is that the state sector is in a prime position to hire some of the best people. Take India, they're sending rockets to Mars and all of that, we know that. and you said you were headhunted. Isn't the situation drastically different today? For example, now if you take India, now Raghuram Rajan is a distinguished service professor of finance at the Booth School in Chicago. Now, he can come in to the central bank, the Reserve Bank of India, hire him, and importantly, give him autonomy, and is fighting the politicians for RBI's autonomy. Now, if you take Sri Lanka, it's a very sad situation. Across all government institutions, are we hiring the best people? Is there any hope for these people to come back, join the state sector, and really feel that they can do their job first unhindered, without interference, a goal to achieve, and go after it? What's your experience of BOI then, and what's the feel of what the situation is today?
Putting me in a spot.
And you can
I left the BOI disillusioned, and I stayed out of the public service. I do not believe we are globally headhunting Sri Lankan talent into key public service positions. I think we need to do that. Have the right person with the right skill set in the right position, whether it is a national bank, or whether it is a national airline, or whether it is a board of investment, or whether it is the tourist board. I think even we in the private sector need to be more open-minded. I, for one, advocate at whatever the boards I sit on, if we cannot find management talent here, let's seek management talent of Sri Lankans and entice them to come over here. In fact, one of the companies, we're looking at paying a Sri Lankan who's based in Hong Kong $150,000 a year, 4 tickets for the family, etc., because we need his skills. And more, let's start it at the private enterprise level, show that as an example, that we are willing to pay the sort of top dollar to attract that sort of talent, so that $150,000 employee would create far more shareholder value, because we cannot find that skill set.
Thank you. And just to wind down, would each of you give your last thoughts on the topic? Just take a minute or so, and then we'll wind down. We'll start with you, Sarinder, and just
I think it ultimately comes down to personal choice and personal decision. And lots of people face the world with a multitude of decisions in front of them to make, wondering which one is the right one. There is no magic answer to that question. The right answer is, or the right decision to make, is the one that you firmly believe in and you have passion to back. If you don't believe in what you're going to do in terms of changing career or whatever it may be, don't do it. If you believe it, go after it. And I think there are living examples here in terms of people who have done that and succeeded. So that's
Thank you. Thank you, Sarinder. Shiroma?
Yeah, I could also, I mean, if you are people who want to come back, if you're looking for lots of negatives, I'm sure there are a lot of negatives. So don't focus on those. There are so many positives also that can be looked at. I mean, life is always a balancing act. So if you weigh the pros and cons, as Sarinder said, you have to make a choice at some point. So don't be afraid. Listen to your heart, and perhaps sometimes it's also important to listen to the heart and then make a choice. And it may be wrong, but what the hell, doesn't matter. You can always correct it.
Rani, on your comments, if you can also touch something we didn't speak about, the implementation of this program.
Yes.
You can just share a few thoughts on that, please.
Yes, as
because
all
you've
of
been
us
involved in this for a while now.
Yeah, as all of us believe, I mean, it's a personal decision, and there's nothing compulsion, and it's your choice. And then if someone were to, most of the Europeans are looking, and even the US people are looking to get Asian experience, this is a good opportunity for you. But in doing so, I would urge the Work in Sri Lanka organization, which is personal, taking personal interest actually to promote this concept, which have been working very hard for the last couple of years on a very voluntary basis, I think should be either formalized, or it should be incorporated, or some legality has to be given to this, simply because, say for example, if any one of the young professionals who want to come and work in Sri Lanka, you should be able to send your CVs, there should be a panel of people who are looking at it, you should be directed to construction, engineering, irrigation, banking, whatever. So there must be some consistent way of doing things, because if you send the CVs and the CVs are lying until, I'm not saying anything to the deeply committed professionals who have been working for this, but there has to be some organized way of doing things. And at the same time, it's not just the profession that you probably must be looking for accommodation facilities, your visa conveniences, and how you are going to locate your families, and how the children are going to go to school, and many other factors. So there has to be some consistent way of doing things. And we've been talking 3 years. We promoted the concept. We have, to a large extent, got a very good network. And after getting the New York network, you are very interested. People are talking to you from US, New York, Washington, Paris, wherever it is. But at the same time, there should be a little more organization and a procedure-wise from this end to facilitate those who are coming, because they cannot go from pillar to post looking for visa requirements, looking for schooling and things like that. So there must be some central organization to help these people who are willing to come. And if they are frustrated at the beginning, they might give up the idea. So just to promote your willingness, I think you should be supported with that.
Thank you.
The Work
Thank
in
you.
Sri Lanka organization.
Philan, your thoughts?
Very quickly, don't get frustrated. Sri Lanka has opportunity. Yes, we have to deal with certain level of mediocrity when it comes to dealing with certain state institutions. But my advice to people is try and create your own little pockets of excellence, your own little business or your own little department that you run. Try and be the best that you can within the context of what, not being able to, we cannot change Sri Lanka overnight. Sri Lanka is evolving. So again, my simple advice, whether it's a business, whether it's something else that you run, try and attract the best possible talent, make it a globally competitive business, or at least competitive in Sri Lanka. And I always think about this, make it your own pocket of excellence.
Thank you. Harsha, your last words.
Okay. I actually lived in UK for more years than I lived in Sri Lanka. But when I actually left, I also had, I think, the settled life, you say. I had a penthouse and I had fast cars, and I was living along the river, having a good time. And then suddenly one day I decided to pack every single thing up and give up and just come back to Sri Lanka. So, if you look at that particular level, you think that in Sri Lanka, normal family, they say, he is very settled now. So, because he has a house, he has a car, he has a fast car, and he's very settled, and he has a river in front of you. So that's even better. So, you have to be absolutely crazy to give up every single thing and come to Sri Lanka, right? So, that's what it is. But what I realized is, like, my parents were in Sri Lanka, and then my mother is in Sri Lanka, so who is going to look after them? Even though they are saying that proudly my son is in America, my son is in Australia, my son is wherever it is, whenever they get ill, they think that I wish my son is back, I wish my daughter is here. They can say very proudly to other people, because our guys are very much about like gossips, right? They are very proud to say where the other person, other son is, the daughter is, but whenever they get ill, they need the children back. So I think the one thing that if you wanted to come back to Sri Lanka, one thing is like, goodness sake, it's better that to be next to your father and mother before they die, right? So that's the most important thing that somebody should think about, right? So next thing is like Sri Lanka is growing very fast. Every single thing, you can't blame the government to say that the government hasn't changed this one, government hasn't done this one, government and that. If I go to Facebook, they're always slugging off the government, all right? So the thing is, like, they can't say, it's no point of government. If you want to change the government, stand up for it, become the president. The next election, we'll vote for you, right? And be the president. Right? So let's change the entire nation, let's change the entire country. So in order to change the country, you can't bank from America and send some, from what you call for this Facebook messages here and there, and then tweet it and say that this is happening this, that is happening this guy is robbing from this particular road, that guy is robbing from that road, and engineers are using from China, Chinese is paying this money. So whenever you go inside, deep inside any of these places, they will say, I can't find an engineer. If you go there and find, today, if you go to find your house, do up your house, most of the time, most of the little enterprises that who has construction engineering firms, the laborer is now the big man, right? The laborer has no bloody idea how to build a house, but laborers are now having their own construction companies. So because we don't have enough professionals, because all the professionals have left this country. So for me, the final word is like Sri Lanka. If you want to change Sri Lanka, you can change Sri Lanka. One of the most important things, you can work for Intel, you can work for Boeing, you can work for Accenture, you can work for the biggest company in the world. right? That you are going to be just a number, just a number. You are not going to be more than a number. But if you come to Sri Lanka, if you be in Sri Lanka, you can be more than a number. Sri Lanka is the only country you can actually change the country. If you are in US, if you are in America, if you are in Australia, wherever it is, possibility of you are changing Australia, possibility of you are changing UK is absolutely zero, almost zero. I don't say absolutely zero, not almost zero. So come back to Sri Lanka, and then don't worry about, when you come to Sri Lanka, don't worry about what's going to happen to me. So you don't have to do this stable, unstable thing. Once you come in here, you have a house, you have somewhere to live, you can have food without no problem. You can eat some of the food, manioka and posambol and stuff like that. And you won't die, you won't die. So if you don't die, you are not in the deathbed, you are going from there to somewhere else. So there are so much, plenty of opportunities in Sri Lanka. So please come back and don't go, don't leave now. Say.
Thank you. And on that note of change, I would like to thank all the panelists here and leave a last thought with you. As Harsha said, it's important that you make a choice, that you are going to be outside of this or come here and be a part of the change. And you have seen a number of scientists here who have come back and make some contribution towards change, because it's only change that can drive us forward. And if even that does not hold good, at least hold back, as you said, on the very simple philosophy that we have of Karuna. And lots of parents are left behind here while children seek a greener pasture. If nothing else works, if you think you're motivated by this deep sense of compassion, come back, have a good life, and take care of the elders, because we're going to have a very aging population in Sri Lanka. So with those thoughts, thank you very much, and I hope you have a great future. Thanks a lot.